What we have compiled for this episode is the History Buff's Guide to the Oscars. Do you want to skip some of the performances? Do you want to skip the jokes? Do you want to get to the things that you really care about, like which historical films are going to win and carry on the narrative of the past? Well, this is the place for you. Hello everyone, and welcome back to Real History. I'm your host, Jared Frederick, and for the first time ever here on our channel, we decided to do something a little bit different in the form of an Oscar reaction video. And specifically, I am going to be paying special emphasis on historical films that will be nominated and that will win in this evening's proceedings, and perhaps offer a little bit of Academy Award history itself as it comes to mind as I'm watching. And yes, the Oscars are overlong, they can be pretentious, they can be about egos, but there's also some very revealing human moments, revealing things about the industry, the evolution of cinema, and for better or for worse, they are by and large the barometer by which we gauge cinematic excellence in the historical record. And for that reason, I think a lot of these movies are worthy of our consideration. One of the things that stands out about the 2024 Oscars is the high number of historical films and biopics that have been nominated. And for me as a historian who has a love of cinema, this is something very exciting because I firmly believe that historians are duty and morally bound to engage with these films and to start conversations about the past and how they intersect with the present. And man, oh man, many of these movies do not disappoint in that regard. Heading into the programming this evening, I'm of the mind that Oppenheimer is definitely the front runner. It's nominated for many awards. I forget how many off the top of my head, but I very much suspect that it will probably walk away with Best Picture, Best Director, and Best Actor, and who knows how many more. But let's go ahead and find out as we examine the 2024 Oscars.
First time ever, 3 foreign language films are up for Best Picture, and 2 of them star Sandra Hüller, which is 2 movies. Sandra plays a woman on trial for murdering her husband in Anatomy of a Fall, and a Nazi housewife living next to Auschwitz in The Zone of Interest. And while these are very heavy subjects for American moviegoers, in Sandra's native Germany, they're called rom-coms.
A little bit of exaggeration there, I think, but a good line nonetheless.
The Oscar goes to Devine.
Very nice. Yes, very good. Worthy, yep. And I do consider The Holdovers to be a historical film of sorts since it is set in 1970, I believe. But let's reflect on this award, the history of it, a little bit further. Best Supporting Actress. Hattie McDaniel, as many of you are probably very well aware, became the first African-American actress to receive an Oscar in this category in 1940. And of course, she received it for her performance as Mammy in Gone with the Wind, a fantastic performance in so many ways. But there's a dark legacy to it in other regards too, because very infamously, she was segregated from the awards dinner until her name was called to receive that award. And then it would not be for another half century until another woman of color would receive that award. And that came about with Whoopi Goldberg in 1991, I believe. Now, several black women have won the award since, and perhaps my favorite of all of them is Lupita Nyong'o, who wins an award for 12 Years a Slave, which I think is one of the best movies of the century thus far. And that's definitely one that I have to review at some point here on Real History.
And the Oscar goes to War is Over, inspired by the music of John.
That's an interesting choice, yeah. Wow. So I haven't seen this film yet, but War is Over is based on the John Lennon and Yoko Ono song of the same title. And I'm really intrigued by this one. It's set during the First World War, as far as I know. And, well, since it's only a 10-minute movie, I'm not going to divulge too much of the plot, because that very well might give it away going from what I've read. But I think that it's really fascinating to think how the First World War is the conflict which Hollywood always uses to illustrate, rather literally in this case, the futility of war. Going all the way back to Wings, 1927 movie, which was the first Best Picture winner, and then All Quiet on the Western Front just a few years later. There's a broader, really interesting historical discussion to be had there, I think.
And the Oscar goes to The Boy and the Heron.
Yeah. This one has received a lot of praise throughout awards season, and it got a lot of playtime in American theaters despite being a foreign feature. Like many of the best Japanese animated features, The Boy and the Heron is set during World War II, and like the previous winner, War is Over, this is a movie about loss. It's a movie about overcoming despair amidst the heartache of armed conflict. And I find it really fascinating that both animated winners are essentially anti-war movies.
I understand that this is a risk-averse industry. I get it. But $200 million movies are also a risk, you know, and it doesn't always work out, but you take the risk anyway. And instead of making one $200 million movie, try making 20 $10 million movies.
Yes, yes. I am definitely on board with this. I cannot tell you how fatigued and tired I am of these overbloated, overdone superhero special effects extravaganzas. Let's get back to the basics here of good storytelling. That's why I love classic films so much, because before we had CGI, before we could blow up buildings with the click of a mouse, you had to rely on good storytelling. And I think it's high time that Hollywood recognize that. And of course, a lot of historical films can fall within that category too. You can fit a lot of big stories in small spaces.
The winner is Poor Thing.
I think a lot of us can agree that Ridley Scott's Napoleon was one of the great misfires of the 2023 awards season. A half a year ago, so many people had high expectations for it. They thought that this could be the next Gladiator, the next great historical epic with fantastic storytelling. And, well, historians had some other thoughts on it. And we're going to be reviewing Napoleon in the very near future. All of that said, I think two of the great strengths for Napoleon was the production design and the costuming. I think that there were these very immersive, well done, generally well researched sets and pieces of wardrobe to help bring that time period to life. And I think that's perhaps one of the few historical things that it excelled in. We'll see if Napoleon fares any better in regard to the costuming award, which is a little bit further down the road.
Tonight is the 50th anniversary of what used to be the craziest moment in Oscar history. At the 46th Academy Awards in 1974, David Niven was in the middle of introducing Elizabeth Taylor when a nude man, a shrieker, ran across the stage, which...
That's definitely one of the more surprising and comical moments in Academy Award history. And I'm sad that they didn't mention the rebuttal that David Niven offered after he noticed that there was this naked man running behind him. And I paraphrase this, but he said, essentially it was unfortunate for that man that he decided to strip down and show all of his shortcomings to the world. So that is some good improv.
I said, can you imagine if... A nude man ran across the stage today. Wouldn't that be crazy?
Jimmy.
What? I can't come there. Do the thing.
Given the historical context that I just offered, this is a pretty funny skit. I have to admit, I do find this comical. Now this is incredible. I can't recall of anything like this, a ceremonial song of sorts being performed at the Academy Awards. This song plays at the very end of Killers of the Flower Moon, which I got to see on a 4-story tall screen, which was so impressive. And I think that in some ways this is an acknowledgement, a tip of the hat for all of the very wrong and inaccurate depictions that Hollywood has tendered of Native American peoples over the past century. And I think the attention that Killers of the Flower Moon has received, and instances like this being included in the awards ceremony, is something that is very historically notable in the realm of the institution.
To my producers, actors, collaborators, all our choices were made to reflect and confront us in the present, not to say, look what they did then, rather look what we do now. Our film shows where dehumanization leads at its worst. It shaped all of our past and present.
These are some very profound words on the director's part, I think, because I'm of the mind that it's conversations like this that show us how the interactions of history and Hollywood can be a double-edged sword. Hollywood can, and often has, drastically misinformed people about the truths and complexities of history. We talk about these all the time on our channel. In other instances, perhaps with the likes of Zone of Interest, they can also become gateways to conversation that show us not only these important episodes of histories and the darker elements therein, but also these universal truths of humanity. How easy is it for us to overlook or shrug off evil that pervades in the world, evil that happens in our own society, in our own neighborhoods, things that we are likely to dismiss in a secondhand nature. So I think this speech really gets to the heart of the matter, especially on the fact of dehumanization, the dehumanization of others in particular, which, as history shows us, has led to many of the great evils in the world.
Oh. Hello, Emily.
Wow. Bit of a frosty hello.
Not at all. No, I'm just happy that we can finally put this Barbenheimer rivalry behind us.
That's right.
Well, that was some transition, going from talking about genocide to the Barbenheimer rivalry of this past summer. I know many people who went to see Oppenheimer and Barbie on the same day. I did not partake in both. I just went to see Oppenheimer. So perhaps I missed out on some unique cultural phenomenon. Or maybe I didn't. One of the things that really surprised me about Oppenheimer, though, I went to see it on like a triple big screen. And as I turned the corner to proceed up the steps, I was suddenly greeted by this huge sea of humanity, hundreds of people sitting in the seats. And I was not expecting this, because usually when I go see historical films in a theater, I'm among a sprinkling of individuals. At other occasions, maybe only one or two people in the whole theater when I go see historical films. And it definitely speaks to the power that Christopher Nolan has in drawing people in to a cinematic experience. Otherwise, I think most audiences wouldn't have had the attention span to dedicate to a 3-hour movie about nuclear physics and the complexities of the finale of the Second World War. So, hats off to Christopher Nolan. That's why I think he's going to win the Oscar tonight.
They've been such a crucial part of our industry since the beginning of cinema.
It's true.
It is true.
They are truly the unsung heroes who risk life and limb for cinema.
All right, we have a nice homage here to the history of classic stunts going all the way back to Buster Keaton. And we see him in the Civil War locomotive chase movie, The General there, which, by the way, I've shown students in the classroom, and many of them end up loving it because the action, the practical effects carries it forward. And you don't even need sound to be entertained by it, which just goes to show that there's no such thing as an old movie if you've never seen it before.
And the Oscar goes to Robert Downey Jr.
Yep. Well deserved. Yeah, so, yeah, good. Robert Downey Jr. had this quiet intensity. The quiet intensity of a bureaucrat, a behind-the-scenes chess player, as he is depicted as Louis Strauss in Oppenheimer, who gets into a huge degree of Cold War controversy during the politics of the 1950s. And, you know, I don't think that he is the villain of the movie. A lot of people tried to paint him as such, although he is a very ambitious individual, as was J. Robert Oppenheimer himself. And so it was perhaps inevitable that these two men were going to be on a collision path with one another.
And the Oscar goes to...
Here we go. This is
Godzilla.
So I likewise got to see Godzilla -1 on the big screen. And as I mentioned on Facebook, well, I took a picture afterwards where I was standing in front of the Napoleon poster, and right beneath it, if I remember correctly, was the Godzilla poster. And I framed the question, which one of these two movies do you think is the better historical film? And oddly enough, in a strange way, Godzilla is a better historical film, at least from a cinematic perspective. I felt more of an emotional connection in a 2-hour movie about a creature that didn't exist but happens in a 1940s semi-post-apocalyptic environment than what I did in the whole 3-hour time span almost of Napoleon. A really good movie that likewise did a pretty good job with the material culture of the 1940s and painting a picture of the stark situation of survival in the immediate wake of World War II. So we don't often think of Godzilla movies in that sort of light, but you should check that one out. I really enjoyed it.
Oppenheimer, Jennifer Lane.
The Oscar
Hopefully you pronounce it better than I did.
Oppenheimer.
I think of Oppenheimer from an editing and artistic standpoint almost like I do with Oliver Stone's JFK. There is this very clever snipping and editing that has overlapping narratives and timelines, and somehow through it all, through effective editing, we are able to make sense of it, and it absorbs us into this world of the past. I think Oppenheimer was incredibly effective in that regard. And it is also way, way more historically accurate than Oliver Stone's JFK, although it is an incredibly entertaining conspiracy theory movie.
We can make sure that the history record is set straight and that the truth will prevail, because Cinema forms memories, and memories form history.
Well, so far, that's the best speech of the night. And that moment where he says that memories form history. Oh, that is such a good line. That's the most powerful thing that's been said tonight, I think. And furthermore, it shows us why Hollywood has a moral obligation to get history right. As we see with Oppenheimer, and as we possibly can see with future movies, the story doesn't have to be sacrificed in the name of entertainment. History is dramatic enough as it is. And really, all you have to do is good research. If a film has bad history, it's because the screenwriter and the director are too lazy to do the legwork. And there's no excuse for it when we have so many books and digital resources available the world over. So I think that my plea to filmmakers out there is to do your homework, because your film will age better if you do.
And the Oscar goes to Oppenheimer.
This is the first Oscar win and second nomination.
Also, not surprising, I think the recreation of the Trinity test as depicted in Oppenheimer was not only a masterclass in special effects, but also in cinematography. These vivid, bright, vibrant shots of the mushroom cloud rising up out of the desert was both an eerie and almost like religious experience. It was very immersive in that regard, and I think the cinematography had a big part to do with all of that.
And the Oscar goes to The Zone of Interest.
I recently watched an interview with the sound editors of Zone of Interest on the PBS NewsHour, I believe. And that piece really demonstrated the length to which these artists, these sound technicians, went to try to capture the horrific sounds of the Holocaust from afar. What does it sound like? People are screaming far away and it's somewhat muted. What does the sound of a burning crematorium sound like? These guys really did their homework to try to capture the authenticity of all of that. One of them even went to some of the riots that happened in Europe in more recent years to capture that sort of cacophony of people yelling in the streets, this just hodgepodge of sound. And here, as we can see, it has paid off.
And the Oscar goes to Oppenheimer.
This is the second Oscar win and third nomination for Ludwig Göransson.
Truly, this was a fantastic musical score by Ludwig Göransson, and that's the best way I can describe it. It had almost this sort of cosmic sound to it. It had this technical, sort of scientific pulse, I think is the best way that I can describe it. I also think it would be interesting if filmmakers, when they make period pieces, if they tried to make more music that evokes that time period, because the soundtrack for Oppenheimer, as wonderful and effective as it is, it's very modern. There's no doubt about it. Imagine doing a movie like Oppenheimer if you had that more orchestral sound that was typical of 1940s movie soundtracks. I think that would be something really cool to see in historical films of the future.
All we asked for was a chance to prove ourselves, a fair and impartial opportunity.
being the classic film buff that I've always been, these moments are always sad for me because with so many of the people being shown on screen, I feel like I grew up with some of them to an extent. And the one that plucks my heartstrings the most here is seeing Andre Braugher up on screen, who was taken away from us far too soon. And fittingly enough, we see him in his depiction as Benjamin Davis in the Tuskegee Airmen. A wonderful performance that he delivered in that movie. Although I am surprised that they didn't highlight him in the movie Glory, which I think one could argue is his best role and what was his iconic breakout role as well. But yes, he and many of the others here will be profoundly missed. I'll say this though, if you want a more holistic and better in memoriam tribute to watch, you have to go to the YouTube channel for Turner Classic Movies. That is very in-depth. At the end of every year, they show filmmakers who have passed on. But both that tribute and this one here, they overdo it a little bit. Like, skip the dancers in the foreground and let the work of the departed speak for itself. That is my thought on the matter.
The greats go above and beyond in their commitment to a role, just as Daniel Day-Lewis stayed in character as Lincoln. This past year, Paul Giamatti was so committed.
You gotta love Paul Giamatti. Paul Giamatti is one of my absolute favorite actors. We've analyzed part of his famous role as John Adams, the HBO series. He was in Saving Private Ryan, of course, as well. But one of the reasons why I really like him is I've met Paul Giamatti. When I was a park ranger at Gettysburg National Military Park, this is probably about 13 or 14 years ago now, he took his son to Gettysburg National Military Park and they went on park ranger programs and they were just going around as a father and son as typical tourists. And he was so down to earth and so kind and so humble, no chip on his block whatsoever. And not to mention the fact that he's one of the great actors of our time. So I'm really partial to Paul Giamatti.
Coleman, your genius as an actor illuminates the genius of an angelic troublemaker who's nearly buried in the history books. Thankfully, Justin is getting his due, as are you. Coleman Domingo.
Coleman Domingo did such a fantastic job in capturing the spirit and the personality of civil rights hero Bayard Rustin, one of the key figures who organized the March on Washington in 1963. And that movie, which is on Netflix, offers us a crucial, I think, behind-the-scenes look of the I Have a Dream speech, everything that preceded it, all of the logistics that went into place into orchestrating that massive and celebrated moment of American history. And Domingo just does such a good job. This is a prime example where I wish more than one actor could win in this category because there were so many great performances among these guys.
And the Oscar goes to Cillian Murphy.
Yep. I called it. I called it.
We made a film about the man who created the atomic bomb, and for better or for worse, we're all living in Oppenheimer's world, so I would really like to dedicate this to the peacemakers everywhere.
That's another great line from an acceptance speech. For better or for worse, we live in the world of Oppenheimer. I think that's the correct answer. Because, of course, the atomic bomb saves many American lives at the end of World War II, but as they say in the movie, it unleashes the genie out of the bottle, and it puts this big question mark above humanity, and that's the exact same way that the movie itself frames the issue. It is not overly judgmental of the decision to use the bomb on Japan. We are presented the story through the mindset and the perspectives of the people who are creating it and the fallout, both literal and political, that emerges after that. So I think it's well said on the part of Cillian Murphy. Here's to the Peacemakers.
On the 30th anniversary for its win for Best Picture, please welcome the Academy Award-winning director of Schindler's List, Steven Spielberg.
Well, as Jimmy Kimmel said at the outset, it seems like Steven Spielberg has season tickets to the Academy Awards, and appropriately so. And in fact, it was 30 years ago this season that Schindler's List won Best Picture at the Academy Awards. So, wow, it's hard to believe it was over a quarter of a century ago now. But Spielberg has been nominated many, many times since. He's essentially been nominated for every movie that he's directed since then. He would go on 5 years later to win an Academy Award for Saving Private Ryan, which we have analyzed super in-depth on this channel. But interestingly enough, he has not won since. But he is younger than his years, and perhaps he'll be up on that stage once again himself on the receiving end.
And the Oscar goes to Christopher Nolan.
Yep, okay, all right. So my other prediction proved correct. We'll see if I can go 3 for 3 here.
Kai Bird and Martin Schoen, thank you for the 25 years you put into the book that this film is based on.
And I'm very glad that he gave a shout out to the Pulitzer Prize winning historians who wrote the book on which Oppenheimer is based, and that is the book American Prometheus. And if you haven't read that book, that is one that you most definitely have to put on your list. So it's nice to see some historians being acknowledged here up on the stage, even if only verbally.
Lily, you are the soul of Killers of the Flower Moon. Every second of your performance as Molly Burkhart is imbued with the plight, resilience, and spirit of the Osage people.
And the Oscar goes to Emma Stone.
I must admit, I am disappointed that Lily Gladstone didn't win. That would have been a historic win, and she certainly earned it. A shaking performance that she delivers in Killers of the Flower Moon, which I think leads to another really interesting conversation. All these conversations and criticisms about Hollywood going woke and whatnot. But, you know, Killers of the Flower Moon hasn't won anything here. Which is disappointing to an extent. I mean, it hasn't won any so far. I don't think it's going to win Best Picture if it has won any of the supplemental ones yet. That really was a good film, especially a good technical film. The cinematography, the music, the performances, the production value, the complexity, this historical mosaic that it constructs, the fact that it, I think, rectifies some of the previous Hollywood problems in the traditional Western genre. I think it would have been great if it would have won some, but it didn't. So, yeah.
Here it comes. And may I see Oppenheimer?
All right.
Yes.
There we go.
Yes. Emma Thomas.
So perhaps it's no lucky estimation on my part. It seemed that Oppenheimer was the odds-on favorite to win the biggest prize of all, but very well deserved. And in a forthcoming episode of Real History, we will be joined by Charlie Murphy of a sister YouTube channel, The Atomic Age, and we will be doing a thorough breakdown of the movie Oppenheimer. I will be offering some historical perspective. Charlie will be offering some very good technical perspective, which I lack completely. And I think together we will make a good dynamic team to impart to you what we think Oppenheimer did right and how it succeeded. So there we have it, the History Buff's Guide to the 2024 Oscars. I hope you enjoyed this very different sort of episode here on Real History. It has been years since I watched the Oscars in their totality, like a growing number of the population. I might catch a few of the highlight reels or best snippets of it online afterward. But I enjoyed this a lot more than what I was expecting. But then again, I love movies, and I especially love history movies. And history movies did really well this evening. Let's just think about some of the historical films that have won or were nominated. Historical epics, biographical films, Oppenheimer, Killers of the Flower Moon, Napoleon, Rustin. The list just goes on and on and on. Napoleon was even nominated, although I don't think it won any, for a few technical awards. I just really enjoy this because, as I said at the outset, it engages the public at large with history. It serves as a platform for conversations for people like me, both in and out of the classroom. And this is why I love historical movies. And I know that's why a lot of you love historical movies as well. With all that being said, thank you for tuning in to this special Oscars ceremony edition of Real History. If you haven't done so already, please hit that subscribe button below. We would really like to have you along for the journey. We appreciate you watching, and until we see you next time on Real History, stay curious.